We've been on such a journey today, everyone. We started out with really heartfelt sharing about why people feel so uniquely passionate about psychedelics and why people have such tightly held beliefs and desires and hopes and fears about the growth of access to psychedelics. We wondered, is it even really possible to do this? Are we all really going to be able to put together a way of expanding access to psychedelics over the next few years that is unlike the other models we've seen in healing and health and wellness? We took a look at the ways in which, if you really want to go for it, we want to give people access to psychedelics and all the support that that requires. We want to do it differently on our own terms. How can we structure an organization so that the purpose and mission and values remain at the forefront, even after growth, even after funding? We talk to people who actually fund organizations and offer their thoughts on philanthropy, impact, venture investing, different ways of thinking about money and gaining money and who is going to have money and how they're going to distribute it. And here is what I've been looking forward to all day, which is people who are actually on this journey. They've been on this journey, some of them, for a very long time. They have not made their lives easier by trying to do things in their own way and trying to put their values and visions and missions at the center of their organization. But everything we talked about this morning and this afternoon, the theory is all well and good. But we're going to find out, and we're finding out now, and are going to continue to find out over the next few years, what is real and what of this can be put into practice, and whether it can succeed, and whether we can show that you don't have to settle for exactly what you were born into. You don't have to settle for doing things conventionally, that you can be creative and inventive and bold. You can lead with integrity, and you can try new things. And sooner or later, people will figure out that a lot of the beliefs they held about the way that you had to do things, they were things that people believed, but they were not necessarily true. So I am really deeply honored to have the presence of the people in this last panel who are going to tell their stories about the work they're doing and the journey they've been on to articulate their values, build a business model supports them, find funding for it, and then operate and grow and flourish. Some of them now, some of them hopefully very soon, in a way that reflects those things. So I'd like to begin by introducing a couple of hometown heroes, Willa Hall and Casey Paleos of New York City's own Nautilus Sanctuary.
Okay. Do we have the thing on? And so if I push that, it'll...
Oh, it's black because of the...
Oh, you know what? So you can turn it on, actually. Sorry. I'll just stand here. It'll be fine.
That's what I'm gone.
Sorry about that.
Let my belly hang out and
I screwed it up.
I just do like a live tweet of some of the quotes.
I didn't realize this
No,
blocked.
that's right. Okay.
I had asked them to turn the monitor on because of my ADHD. It was going to really distract me if I was seeing the slides go, but I can't see them from behind the podium, so this isn't a necessary delay. It's all my fault. Sorry. Yeah. I don't know if I advanced it, though. I might have. In the meantime, I'd like to thank Kevin and Liana and everybody at Horizons and North Star for inviting us and for putting on this amazing series of talks, presentations. Really appreciate all the work that they're doing. to create a nexus and a nucleus for so many really amazing people. Okay, maybe can we go back? We're not allowed to go back? All right, we'll just leave it there. That's fine. We'll just start from there
Okay,
you'll press it again when we go to there.
okay.
All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Casey Paleos. I'm a psychiatrist and psychedelic researcher. In 2020, Nautilus Sanctuary was founded by myself, Dr. Willa, and 3 of our colleagues, whose photos you would see there if we weren't advanced in the presentation. But yeah, but it can't go back. We can't go backwards.
With the red button,
Can you go red?
I can't, it's not.
All right, it's okay. As long as we'll move forward from here, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I went back. We can't go back. If you just leave it there and then now press it again when we get to there.
Okay.
Okay? Don't press it again until at that point.
Okay.
All right, sorry. So in 2020, Nautilus Sanctuary was founded by myself, Dr. Willa, and 3 of our colleagues at the Center for Research and Innovation, Training and Supervision, and ultimately, upon FDA approval, delivery of MDMA and other psychedelic-assisted therapies. I'm going to spend a few minutes describing some of the why behind what we've been up to, and then hand it over to Willa to tell you a little bit more about the what and the how. So Nautilus Sanctuary arose from the deep inspiration that we felt doing this profound and paradigm-shifting work as study therapists and MAPS' MDMA-assisted therapy trials. Then, as now, we felt we were being called as first movers in this field toward both a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous responsibility. We know that the choices made by treatment providers like us over the next few years are likely to set precedents that will reverberate in this industry for decades. We thus wanted to create an organization that would enable us to do this work in a way that embodies our core value of providing widespread accessibility to treatment without sacrificing integrity or quality of care. We obviously had no earthly idea how to accomplish that, so we consulted with a series of experts in the healthcare business. The counsel we received was disconcerting. We were uniformly advised to adopt a corporate strategy employed ubiquitously in the healthcare industry, known as the friendly or captive PC model. You can advance there, Willa. Oh, maybe not, sorry. Oh, okay, well, there's our colleagues. There's us revolving around maps. Okay, great. Okay, so we were uniformly advised to adopt a corporate strategy employed ubiquitously in the healthcare industry called the friendly or captive PC model. In this model, a PC or professional corporation is created, which as a provider of medical services cannot be legally owned or operated by anyone other than a medical doctor. Alongside the PC, an MSO, or Management Services Organization, is also formed, which is owned by the MSO's founders and their investors, none of whom need any qualifications for ownership or governance beyond the money they bring to the table. And finally, and this is the kicker, the PC makes itself contractually captive to the MSO by granting it unilateral authority to revoke the doctor's ownership of the PC and reassign it to another doctor of the MSO's choosing, more or less at the MSO's sole discretion. The essential purpose of this model is to circumvent laws governing the corporate practice of medicine, which restrict ownership of medical clinics to the professionals sworn to uphold the standards of the profession and to do no harm. Even and perhaps especially when this means sacrificing profits in favor of what is best for patient care. It is, in other words, a well-meaning but ultimately ineffectual attempt to enforce steward ownership principles through legislation because the state correctly recognizes the threat posed by unfettered business motives when human lives are at stake. So, on careful consideration of our parent options and our collective values, we elected to forego this advice and we formed a nonprofit instead. Though we privately despaired of finding a way to turn a nonprofit into a sustainable business that could compete in the industry and have a meaningful impact at scale. In the year and a half since then, however, we have learned of a third way, a middle path between the nonprofit route and the methods of extractive capital, namely the steward ownership model we've heard so much about today. If putting people before profits is to be anything but a hollow slogan, we need to understand what this means in the context of psychedelic-assisted therapy. We need to understand what this means in the context of psychedelic-assisted therapy and why steward ownership is so crucial for protecting this field's long-term viability from the internal and external threats that are certain to assail it post-FDA approval. To put it as briefly as possible, it comes down to the quality of the therapeutic container, which is a highly nuanced set of relationships that arises between the patient and the therapy team on dosing days and throughout the course of treatment during prep and integration. A healthy container is necessary for these treatments to have their desired effects, and it is deeply informed by the factors of set and setting, which include the cultural and socioeconomic contexts in which those relationships are embedded, and the spoken and unspoken frames within which the treatment is taking place. As the visionary 20th century philosopher and cultural theorist Marshall McLuhan once said, "The medium is the message." And under the influence of psychedelics, all messages are amplified. The medium in this case refers to the manner in which these treatments are conveyed to the public by all levels of the organization, and the implicit and explicit values that are embodied by the manner of that conveyance. Thus, through all of this, what we have had to continuously ask ourselves, what every clinician, every researcher, every entrepreneur, investor, policymaker, in short, what every person in this space must ask themselves is, what is the medium of our message? What is our North Star? What are we all here for? To put it plainly, are we truly here to bring healing to and freedom from human suffering and the suffering that suffering humans inflict on one another and on the planet? Or are we in fact here to perpetuate and feed off of it? Because of the way these substances work, our answers to these questions, no matter how privately, even unconsciously held, will arterialize the fruits of our labor in ways that will impinge directly on the quality of the therapeutic containers we create. Bad containers will lead to bad outcomes. It's as simple as that. And bad outcomes, particularly in the early going, will spell disaster for an industry wholly dependent on public acceptance of substances still bleeding from the stigmata of the drug war. The threshold for regulatory clampdown and public mistrust is likely to be quite low in the critical first decade post-FDA approval. The good news, however, is that there is still plenty of time for us to get this right. Thanks.
Thank you, Casey. I'm Willa Hall, and I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've spent 35 years training and practicing in the field, and I've now spent 5 of those years working on MAPS's phase 3 studies. I can honestly say that I have never been so excited about a treatment approach in my life. MDMA-assisted therapy is the tool I have been waiting for because it helps us address traumas that have previously been untouchable using traditional methods. Here in New York, I've been watching my professional community, which shunned or laughed off this work just a few short years ago, really coming around to the power of these treatments. So yes, there's going to be a high demand for both training and treatment in MDMA and other psychedelic-assisted therapies in the coming years. And as we all have been saying, we need to get this right. So I'm going to talk to you now about what Casey and I have been doing, what we've been able to build so far with Nautilus to get ready for when these become legal treatments. To create our own MSO in accordance with the state laws governing the corporate practice of medicine, the Nautilus organization has established 2 legal entities to date, with a 3rd in development. I'm going to draw you a map of these entities and how they interact or will interact to support the growth and expansion of our mission. The first one is our PLLC, Nautilus Psychiatric Services. This is our research arm. It has an actual physical site that houses and runs the largest phase 3 study site here for MAPS in New York City. As a PLLC, its legal structure allows us to conduct clinical research, but it cannot serve as an investment vehicle. It is funded right now entirely by MAPS and by donated goods and services. And this is where we are treating participants with MDMA-assisted therapy and collecting data from MAPS that will help to legalize this treatment and clarify the factors associated with its safety and efficacy. Along the way, we as the providers are adding to our own expertise and understanding of how to best deliver this treatment and sustain a high quality of care and satisfaction, both for our participants and our clinicians. And I want to take a moment on this point because, as any good mental health care provider knows, trauma is not addressed without difficult emotions coming up for all parties. This is why careful assessment of our clients is so important. Sometimes people are not a good fit for this treatment, and if they are, we need a good read on the kinds of care and support that they're going to need to achieve a positive outcome. And this is equally true for our therapists. Doing this kind of work is not for everyone. In the coming years, we want to attract and retain talented and qualified therapists who are drawn to doing psychedelic-assisted treatment. To do this, we need to take care of them. We do that by creating a culture of safety, community, and support that can help build their resilience and their self-reflective capacities in order to prevent things like burnout and secondary trauma and other kinds of problems that are known to show up in mental health care providers, especially when they're working with a high-needs population. At least you think I'm going off topic here, which you guys probably don't. My point is simply this. Taking care of our therapists is not just a nice thing to do, it's really smart business. The second legal entity we've established is our 501c3 nonprofit Nautilus Sanctuary. It can receive and direct philanthropic funds to projects that support our mission, like scholarships for treatment and training, community outreach programs, and research protocols that innovate or treat specific populations in need. Execution on these projects is then made possible by the PLLC. For example, our inaugural project is the COVID study. This is a clinical protocol which uses MDMA-assisted therapy to treat stress-related disorders in healthcare and hospital workers who've been affected by their work on the front lines of the COVID pandemic. Not only will we be able to provide healing and relief for 20 of our New York City heroes in the healthcare industry, but we will be able to help train and certify 20 new MDMA therapists. We also think the COVID study is a wonderful way to herald the coming of this innovative trauma treatment to New York City prior to legalization. We know that once legalization happens, we will not be able to grow our PLLC into the center of excellence that we aim to become on philanthropic dollars alone. So we are establishing a third legal entity, a C Corp, which we are calling Nautilus Psychedelic Medicine Institute. NPMI will be a for-profit, steward-owned MSO with contractual ties to the PLLC and the nonprofit. This legal entity will be set up to raise investor capital with the explicit purpose of building out our PLLC into a large urban clinic geared exclusively to providing gold standard psychedelic-assisted medicine. Operating as a center of training and research allows us to take advantage of a city filled with students and practitioners from multiple academic institutes who are interested in training in psychedelic medicine. This is one way we can offer people quality care at a lower cost. Scholarships and innovative group protocols are others. As clinicians, Casey and I are passionate about protecting the integrity of this work and understand better than most the factors that can compromise the quality of care that people receive from their providers. We are dedicated to creating a culture of safety, community, and support in our organization that will permeate not just our clinic, but all parts of our organization. In other words, we want to create a good place for people to work and a good place for people to heal. We are not naive to these challenges. We understand complexity and compromise, But what we can't compromise on is our North Star. These medicines create sacred spaces for healing, which is the right of every human to access and the duty of every provider to protect. If you share our North Star and want to help us shape this industry, please come talk to us when you have a chance.
Okay, we are going to continue to hear from people who have actually already delivered psychedelic medicine to many people. And it is my pleasure to welcome Rachel Aidan from Synthesis to the stage next.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good to see you. Good to be back. Thank you, Kevin and North Star, for getting us all back together again. So I'm going to share today about our journey to actually transitioning to stewardship governance. We came across this idea a few years ago, and we've actually done it. We spent the last year making the initial conversion, and there's a lot more work to go. So I'm going to tell us a little bit about who we are at Synthesis. In 2017, we ran a couple of pilots, and in 2018, we began offering safe, legal, medically supervised psilocybin retreats at our venue based just outside Amsterdam. We work with truffles containing psilocybin. These are legal in the Netherlands. Our team, our retreat team, has been leading 3- and 5-day retreats in a group model with a group of 16 people for the last few years. And we've also been working with small groups and private clients on a case-by-case basis. So top of 2020, just before March, our COVID hit, we had seen about 3,500 applications to our retreats. We had seen and facilitated 750 participants through their psilocybin journeys. We had been a part of and are still working in, contributing to and collaborating with peer-reviewed research partners, dominantly in Europe. And we launched our psychedelic practitioner training in, early 2021 with 60 inaugural students. We were able to get 10 of them completely funded to participate in that program, and we now have about 3,000 people on our waiting list. We're going to be relaunching our next cohort in the fall. So it's a little bit about us, but as you've heard today, not a really unique story, is, we basically were turning into a pretty, I'm going to use the word typical company, and that our financial ownership was really reflective of the control and who was making the decisions in the company, and our org chart really looked like that. So we were well on the way to this kind of fate of year 1 and 2, we were bootstrapping, we were working, hearts of gold, just in the work with the clients, doing our thing. We took on early seed funding, and then we started to get into raising a bit more money, and we found ourselves with a particularly extractive situation. Somebody trying to merge us and acquire us and get us to IP, and we were not interested nor ready. And so we were really clear that if we went that way, we're going to lose our team, we're not going to be doing the work we're after anymore, and essentially our company was going to be sold, upsides were going to be privatized, and our long-term mission was going to be cannibalized, basically. So we got to work looking for how can we protect the long-term company mission and our independence, really, and this long-term benefit of a common purpose. And we found steward ownership. And really the 2 key principles, as we've heard today, is about self-governance. And this control of the company really moves over to stewards. And these are people who are actively engaged in the business and the mission. So it's no longer a sellable personal asset. It's no longer our founding team. We don't own it anymore. The purpose owns it. And all the profits are committed to being reallocated to our mission and our stakeholders. And so we're still in a deep design process. I'm going to show you in a minute just how complex this is. But I wanted to be actually really transparent here today and share with you a bit of a blueprint, I guess, of this is literally what I'm going to show you with some things edited for privacy, of exactly how we had to convert the early seed funding to this model and go raise a Series A. And that we did it. So a big shout out to our investors there are impact investors that care and want to support doing this the right way. So briefly, the kind of 5 pieces is blueprint is if you're seeking funding or you're converting funding, you're looking for aligned capital, as I call it. is really explaining this new model for the psychedelic ecosystem. Like, so many investors have no idea about stewardship, and they're super freaked out about it. They don't know what it is. You have to take time to explain that, and particularly your why, right? Like, why are you doing it? Because you heard, I think Camille said earlier, there's no like off-the-shelf solution. It's really complex bit of work. And then the second thing is steward ownership, really explaining the principles, because that's a big shift to say you don't get to stay and play forever. Different people are going to be making the decisions around here, so it's a big deal. And then we showed them, like, look, here's the old corporate structure, and this is what we're proposing. And we really broke down two pieces of what does that mean for them, and we did an investor analysis so they could really see, you know, what did you put in and how are you going to get your returns and your investment and also an impact. So I'm going to skim through these. I don't have a lot of time. So the first thing, I'm not going to read all these. I think we all get the slides, but we really wanted to share with you guys like exactly how we talked about it with our investors. We really started with talking about safeguarding the sacred. Our company, we're very focused on a transpersonal approach. We like to hold the medical and the science alongside the wisdom and the lineage pieces. And our team represents that out there in the Netherlands and then growing here into the US. So we really wanted to talk about how important it was to safeguard the sacred and drive up health equity, recognizing the history of the plants, of course. And we just saw a big differentiation on our philosophy. We weren't wanting to be clinical, and we weren't wanting to be retreat. I wanted to do something a bit different. And we wanted to move away from just nice aspirations and marketing language and pretty words, and actually how are we going to apply our code of ethics, which our team has identified as safety and integrity, sustainability and nature connection, access and JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, how we want to be collaborative in this space and not just build synthesis, but be a part of an ecosystem, and the tools we're going to need to be very transparent to do all this. So that was where we stood. And then in the end, like I've said, it was aligning the corporate structure with our values instead of lining ourselves up to business values and, right, like fighting for our values. So a little bit about that. And then steward ownership. I won't go into this because we've seen a whole lot of it today, but there's research from Purpose, who we also work with, around mission production. Obviously, prevents acquisition consolidation that you don't want. It attracts very different people, as you can imagine. Improves survivability and a lot more innovation you tend to see in steward-owned companies. So this was how we showed them the old corporate structure was the investor shares, founder shares. And what we were proposing is this new corporate structure where there's no steward shares. We chose, because we're in Europe, we don't have a perpetual purpose trust option like the US. The golden share model is the most powerful 1%, and it controls that our company can never be bought and sold. It has to vet any kind of like a merger. You can still have mergers and you can do things, but it's very controlled. And these are private companies that exist all over the place that control any decisions. They can veto, but they have no economic benefit. And then investors, we talk about this middle way. We don't feel like it's a bad word. Investors, many people we know are people that worked really hard to get where they got, and they want to do good things. Those are good investors, and we are so fortunate to have them. I'm not going to read all these. I'm going to go through because I got the time, but it just kind of spells out. We shifted from more directed voting rights. So instead of just kind of a wide open net, is specifically where are we looking for their input. And then basically that second point is we're buying ourselves out over a timeline, and we just predetermined what that deal looks like. And as a condition of the investment, our investors gave us 12 months to complete design, because this is not a short, easy process, as you've heard today. That's out of place. We did an analysis. I'll leave that there. Things I noticed as we went through it is steward control. Investors, the feedback we got felt like we're going to exclude them, and we're not. It's about a stakeholder community where they have a really powerful and important voice. It's about balancing the field. I'm going to skip on past this. And so this is a bit more in the design process and how deeply, we're going to take the next 10 months. And to one of the gentlemen who was asking a question before about who actually should be right at the very beginning of this design, it's not just us at Synthesis, it's a lot of our partners in this space. In patients, a lot of our work and research. We know that like our Connectedness program we're doing with Roz, and we were looking at integration for patients that, they go through research and they no longer have access. They have a lot to say about design. And so we're really integrating a lot of people that are outside of our organization to work through all these. I'd say the hardest thing we're up against is cultural pieces and the performance and accountability pieces. So how do you still have to perform in traditional business metrics, but then you have all these impact goals, and so there's just it's a really hard place that we're at. It's not just, you can just throw up some things you want to measure and that's it. Like, what are we looking at, 10, 20, 30 years out to be accountable for this model? And the other big piece is open book management. If you haven't heard of it and you're getting into stewardship, I think it's like a non-negotiable. It's an ultimate transparent financial model, not just for your organization, but your whole community. So you're really sharing all your data consistently in an open book format. Just noticing time, so I'll skip ahead. We saw the slide earlier, just acknowledging we're one of the first in the space to actually enact it, but there's so many organizations across the globe, mostly foreign, that have been doing stewardship for a very long time. It's exciting to learn from and with them. And finally, just knowing there's a lot of detail, and the things I've heard, especially working with Bennett, Transformative Capital Institute, a lot of partners this year, is people want to do this. It's expensive and it takes a lot of time. So Ben and I are putting together with Transformative Capital on the 15th, really want to get in, open up the hood, and really show like how to, for companies that don't have tens of thousands of dollars to go and do this, and start to build an ecosystem together. So that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And it is my great honor next to bring to the stage Tom Eckert, who you heard referenced earlier is the person who, with his late wife, Cherie, started with the dream of maybe there is a way that we could find a way to provide regulated, safe psilocybin experiences to people without involving quite so many psychiatrists along the way. And Tom is going to share with us a little bit about the story of 109 and how it relates to funding and growing an ecosystem. And we're also going to hear more from him, as well as Angela Albee from the Oregon Health Authority on Saturday. So thank you for coming out here and the work you've done, Tom. And you're on.
Okay, hi everybody. So yeah, I'm Tom. My late wife, Cherie, and I were the architects of Oregon's Measure 109, the ballot initiative campaign that successfully legalized psilocybin therapy and wellness services throughout our state. And so now I'm currently serving as the chair of Oregon's governor-appointed Psilocybin Advisory Board, which is now working really hard to make recommendations to the Oregon Health Authority as it develops rules and regulations for the statewide program, which is set to roll out in 2023. So usually when I tell the story of Measure 109, which I'm going to do on Saturday at Cooper Union, I like to emphasize the inspirations that gave rise to it. Some of those inspirations aren't too surprising. Of course, Cherie and I were psychotherapists. We wanted to harness the power of psychedelics for healing and help address the mental health crisis in Oregon. We also wanted to end the 50-year prohibition on psychedelic therapy, which we did. But just as importantly, we wanted to think really deeply about how to integrate psychedelics back into the culture. So we wanted to put psilocybin therapy and wellness on its own foundation, give it its own licensing framework, and truly give it an integrated platform, one capable of addressing a whole spectrum of concerns, from prevention to wellness to therapy and medicine. So we wanted to advance a model that was really tailored to the unique quality of the psilocybin modality and all that it entails, which, as you guys know, is quite a lot. So it really represents a shift in Oregon from a more prescriptive, medicalized approach toward a more holistic, therapeutic, humanistic model that fully orients us to those inner resources and our kind of inner capacity to grow and mature and even transcend. It's a model that centers the healing energies right directly within us, while connecting us to something greater than ourselves, of course. So out on the campaign trail, Cherie and I quickly found that the culture was ready for that kind of message. And I think it's just because it's empowering and it's true, and it speaks equally to everyone. So it was a really great experience out there in Oregon. Part of our understanding of the campaign and as a statewide program now in development is that psilocybin is not just a pharma drug. It's not a new antidepressant just to be brought to market. Instead, we see it through more of a lens of, I think, what it really is, which is an experiential, existential, psycho-spiritual medicine. And most essentially, a real, vulnerable human experience, right? It's an experience. It's unique to the individual. And after all, this is the mushroom. It's been around forever. As you all know, indigenous cultures from different parts of the world use psilocybin and other plant medicines in ceremonial contexts for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And really, to boot, here in the US, we've been studying psychedelics and psilocybin since the 50s. This is not like a new drug. It's actually part of a very expansive collective heritage. And so for lots of reasons, we didn't want to just hand this over to a strictly medicalized, prescription-based, pharma-driven psychiatric model. With all due respect, and really a whole lot of respect is due to the heroic scientists that essentially rebirthed the psychedelic movement in the 21st century. The FDA approval process simply can't be the sole source of progress, nor can it exclusively define this container. Access to psychedelic plant medicines can't just be restricted to a medical complex. Psilocybin and the deeply human experience that it activates will not be dominated by pharmaceutical companies. And a bulwark is a ballot initiative, which Oregon proved by carving out a new space for a therapeutic wellness model that incorporates careful safety, practice, and ethical standards with a backbone of specific training and accountability, while opening doors of access to anyone who might safely benefit without needing a prescription, without needing a diagnosis. So I think in Oregon, we're really showing what's possible here. The measure is an example of creative legislation. We really used legal language to carve out a new space in our culture, and I hope that cultural space expands and proliferates and helps to create a new narrative around mental health nationally. We are so proud of Oregonians who came out in force to support the measure, all 1.3 million of them who voted yes for psilocybin therapy, carrying Measure 109 to a decisive and historic victory with commanding 56% of the statewide vote, something that would have been thought unthinkable just a few years ago. Thank you. So for those interested in wanting to see Oregon succeed or start a business in Oregon, I would just ask that you really take the time to understand it, understand the requirements of the measure, and also keep track of the recommendations now coming through the advisory board. So if you Google Oregon Psilocybin Services, you'll find a dedicated page on oregon.gov, which tracks all our progress, all our meeting recordings. It's all very transparent, all the documents, and just a bunch of good information there. But while this evolving legal framework offers a solid container for this kind of work, it's only a container. Community is the real key to ensuring the integrity and sustainability of the Oregon system. The responsibility is with everyone who participates. And while the framework kind of potentiates this marketplace, all these enterprises make up one community with the shared mission to make Oregon and the statewide program the best it can be and truly light the way for states across this great nation. And finally, I'd like to mention a project that's really dear to my heart. As you heard, I lost my beloved wife, and the movement lost a pioneering hero in Cherie Eckert. She passed away a month and a half after our election night victory in November of last year. Cherie was, of course, the co-creator of Measure 109, had a very clear vision about its implementation. In fact, she communicated a clearly worded wish to develop an institution that, and I quote her, guided by on-the-ground community leaders, would allocate resources to support facilitator training, community education, and service delivery for often underserved populations in Oregon. So in honor of Cherie's legacy and vision, we launched the Cherie Eckert Foundation to support equitable access to psychedelic education and services via scholarships and subsidies. And the foundation's, thank you. So the foundation's first effort is a scholarship program to advance a diverse body of students working toward licensure as psilocybin practitioners across Oregon. Then in 2023, once provider licenses are issued, we intend to cover the costs of services for psilocybin therapy candidates in need of deep healing. Now, with an initial fundraising objective of $1 million, the foundation's ultimate goal, it's a little bit lofty, but I think we can do it, is in lieu of insurance coverage, create a sliding scale for psilocybin services across the state of Oregon. So you can learn more about the Cherie Eckert Foundation at cherieeckert.org. And I will try to make myself available throughout the conference, so please come talk to me if you'd like to support that mission. And that's about it for me. So thank you all for taking the time to listen, and thank you for supporting Oregon all of these years. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And again, we're going to hear much more about Measure 109 and more details about the implementation. And as Joe Green mentioned earlier, there is not enough attention being paid to what is happening in Oregon right now, where again, in 2023, there will be a legal and regulated market for psilocybin experiences within the United States that does not rely on the FDA pathway and is something truly unique and creative that I think we're all going to learn a lot from. So next, it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage once again someone who you heard speaking from the heart this morning, but who is now going to speak a little more cerebrally about a very important project related to insurance infrastructure, payer infrastructure, and equitable access to psychedelic medicine that does flow through the medical pathway. So I welcome back to the stage Leah Mix, who is going to talk to us about Enthea.
This is so exciting to hear about all these incredible projects. Amazing. Let me figure out the clicker situation here. Thanks, Kevin. Enthea is an entity born in, by, and for community. We are a nonprofit health plan administrator, so an insurance company light, that is dedicated to psychedelic healthcare. No? I'll get it, I promise. There we go. We envision safe, affordable access to psychedelic healthcare for all who can benefit. Our mission is to expedite insurance coverage for psychedelic therapies. But our mission is just one of hundreds, if not thousands, of unique and significant missions, endeavors, and purposes that live in the hearts and minds and actions in this ecosystem and beyond. Today, I wish to offer you a story, not so much about the what of Enthea, but about the how. How Enthea came into being, how she evolved, and how she is carrying out her mission. Enthea started with an ethos that can be seen in our symbol. Enthea comes from the Greek word entheogen, which means to bring about the divine within. I'm having clicker trouble. There we go. The circle represents our honoring of the inner healing wisdom within all of us. So we start our mission to help bring healing to others within ourselves. I really am having clicker trouble, Kevin. Click really hard. There we go. And back and forward. Okay, we'll get it. So the arms represent the connection to earth, to source, and to the relationships that hold and nurture us. The sparkles represent the light that we all shine, and also the community that is the container for our growth and helps keep us accountable to one another and to our values. I think if I wink, I keep winking. Does that help? There we go. Maybe that's the key. Just wink. Enthea's community or tribe is called the Learning Collective. In 2020, before we incorporated Enthea, we brought together a small group of like-minded friends and advisors, including the founding members of North Star, to help us with a challenging question: how to structure Enthea as a for-profit company in a way that would protect the mission from the pressures of extractive economics, incentives. Now, this was before the steward ownership model was really a conversation in the psychedelic ecosystem. While the group included people with diverse expertise in economics, finance, business, law, diversity, equity, inclusion, and so forth, the commonality was that each person was orienting their work in the field of psychedelics through a personal growth path. From that first cozy dinner gathering, it was decided that Enthea would be structured as a benefit corporation with a steward ownership model, which we were just starting to learn about, and a business ethics community was formed. The intention of the founding members and advisors of the Learning Collective was simple: to gather, to learn forward into new paradigms of business, economics, finance, and beyond. We soon articulated just two founding values for the collective. The first is the understanding that the expansion of consciousness that we are hoping to offer the world through access to psychedelics is first and foremost an inside job. That is where expansion of consciousness happens. That is where paradigm shift happens. That growth then is held in our relationships that support us, and then in our communities that help keep us accountable, and then out from there. The second value is the understanding that we are creating our reality right now, in this moment. It's not out there someday, it's going to be great. It's right now. What energy are we bringing to this moment right now? That's actually what we're creating. And that's what we're creating from. In articulating and holding these values, we began to attract and identify other people in the ecosystem who were also holding them, and the community organically grew. By participating in the Learning Collective, members were able to draw down on collective wisdom as well as specific domain expertise. We shared knowledge and thought partnership. We pointed out each other's blind spots. We had fun learning and creating together. And the community grew. It was this container that held Enthea through 9 difficult months of fundraising as a for-profit company. And it was the same loving container that held me personally as I went through a profound spiritual emergence that forced me to confront my own unconscious beliefs and fears that had me imprisoned in the belief that Enthea needed to be a for-profit company in order to succeed. As my unconscious fears became conscious and were burned away, what arose from the ashes was Enthea as a nonprofit 501c4 atop an innovative Trinity structure. With this alignment of structure and mission, the energy shifted completely. Within 6 weeks of reincorporating as a nonprofit, we had $1 million commitment from an ideal donor. This is the Enthea Trinity. Enthea is the 501c4 health plan administrator. Gestalt is a for-profit B Corp tech subsidiary. This is a payment innovation platform for healthcare that aggregates a variety of funding types in one place so that patients can afford psychedelic therapy sooner and practitioners can get paid reliably and more quickly. Access Enthea is a separate 501c3 sister organization that is set up as a trust to house a variety of patient assistance funds that will be administered through the Gestalt platform. Having this sister 501c3 also allows us to create a collateral pool that will help us to financially de-risk adoption of psychedelic healthcare for employers who want to cover it sooner rather than later. This de-risking should accelerate the adoption curve significantly. It's definitely my thumb.
It's this button.
No wonder. Okay, so here's the governance structure that keeps the missions of all three entities aligned while mitigating for the conflicts of interest or other legal or regulatory concerns. Looks like this. You'll notice that our Jedi Council spans all three entities so that we will be fully unified in our DEI practices and goals. With this structure, what we have been able to accomplish, not just towards the mission, but towards the vision of access to psychedelic therapies, is beyond what we could have ever dreamed with a single for-profit company. This evolution, inside and out, personal and business, was only possible through the support and wisdom of our community. Tomorrow, I have the great honor of sharing with the employees of a progressive company that their employer will be the first in the country, and probably in history, to cover psychedelic healthcare as healthcare benefits for them and their families. These Enthea administered benefits will go live January 1st. That same day, Gestalt will launch its minimum viable product. And tomorrow, with the help of generous donors, we will be seeding the first of many patient assistance funds inside of Access Enthea. We are poised to launch in 5 markets in the next 2 quarters. And as an aligned nonprofit, we are closely supporting MAP's commercialization efforts with plans to launch coverage for MDMA-assisted therapy at national scale post-FDA approval. The Enthea team, this is my very favorite slide in the deck. The Enthea team is achieving all of this with only 7 full-time and 2 part-time staff. I believe this is possible because we are rigorous about supporting each other's growth and also about being highly attuned to the energy from which we are creating. If that vibration is off, we slow down and we see what we have to learn before forging ahead. And we laugh a lot. We have a lot of fun. It's really great. My list of gratitudes is very long. I will take this opportunity, though, to honor those who have provided much wise counsel and are walking a deep path of embodiment of the values which I have shared with you today. Thank you, Janice Phelps, Bob Jesse, Patricia James, Silver Clovedo, Bill Melton, Giselle Acevedo, Ricky Coddington, Robert Strahan, David Armistead, Ann Harrison. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Our next speaker, and we're getting to the fun stuff. We're going to talk about money again, everyone. Is a venture firm who is, again, trying to do things a little differently and unconventionally, fund the things that they believe in on terms that they believe are agreeable and respectable, and to also contribute to the communities that have been neglected and underappreciated in bringing these medicines into the world. So I'd like to welcome Giles Hayward of Woven Science.
Thank you. Great, thank you, Kevin. It's truly wonderful to be here. I can't quite believe that it's been almost 2.5 years since we first started out on this journey. And be here today surrounded by all of you guys, but also our portfolio companies and our advisors, who've all contributed to building Woven Science, an ecosystem of companies supporting patients through each stage of the psychedelic treatment arc, with reciprocity built into its core. I don't need to tell you guys that psychedelics pose a huge opportunity to transform the mental healthcare paradigm. But at Woven, we don't believe that psychedelics are a magic pill. In fact, we believe that we have to take an holistic approach in order for us to successfully treat this mental illness crisis, in order for us to shift the conversation towards sustaining mental wellness. And to do that, we have to focus on all aspects of the treatment arc, all the way from diagnosis to preparation to treatment, but also to the underserved pieces of the treatment arc, which is integration and community. And to do that, we basically invest and incubate businesses that serve each of those different sectors. So why an ecosystem? And why is an ecosystem approach so important to Woven? Well, Bennett Zellner did a great job today, and so many people have spoken about ecosystems. I'm going to do what lots of people have told me not to do, which is share the first time that I actually worked with these sacred medicines some 13 years ago. As with so many people, this experience was life-changing, and it showed me viscerally the interconnectivity of all things, the substrate that connects everything. And at the end of this journey, she told me to go and reconnect and learn from the natural world. And I had no idea what that meant at the time, but I knew that being a corporate financier in Russia was not what I was supposed to be doing. So I quit my job, moved to California, where I studied an MBA in sustainability, and I got the chance to explore systems thinking and biomimicry, and really did a deep dive into these natural principles that create thriving and prosperous ecosystems. And there were 3 key principles that really came forth, which were diversity, connection, and reciprocity. And are these 3 principles that we weave into all aspects of our woven ecosystem. As you know, we're building an industry from the ground up, and that requires so many different disparate subsectors to come together. And the only way that's going to happen effectively and efficiently is if we take an ecosystem approach, if we foster communication and collaboration. Woven is structured as a permanent capital vehicle, not as a VC, which allows us to prioritize long-term value over short-term gains. We have a diversified portfolio where we invest and incubate and build companies in 4 key pillars of wellness, drug development, delivery, and health tech. And then we're also able to access the collective or enhance the collective intelligence of our ecosystem. By looking at the industry through multiple different lenses, we can understand the opportunity set and the gaps that are required to fulfill and build this industry. So we either find businesses that are doing things really well and invest into them, or we build businesses, we incubate them. We've just set up a joint venture with Founders Factory, which is the Y Combinator of Europe, where we went through this incredible process of speaking to all of our portfolio companies, to Enthea Gestalt, to David Champion at Maya, and also to all of our advisors, Jamie Wheel and Dr. Molly Maloof. And it was just extraordinary to hear where they felt those gaps were. And also, how could we support their businesses? You know, Maya is a wonderful example where, you know, we started to look at the ancillary pieces that could actually support the great work that David Champion is doing. And then there's the piece that I am most excited about, and that is the network effects of an ecosystem. And how do we build the synergies between the different businesses within our ecosystem? We co-led an investment into People Science, who are a virtual CRO using D2C strategies to really scientifically prove efficacy within the alternative medicine space. And through our wellness pillar and our nutraceutical arm, we were able to use People Science's technology and services to really validate efficacy in the nutraceutical space, which is so needed. And we also gave People Science access to our 3.5 million followers. So I've spoken to you about connection and diversity, but that third principle, that principle of reciprocity, is so dear to my heart, but also to my co-founder's heart, Nick von Christiersen, who sadly can't be here today. And when we really set out to build Woven, we wanted to put reciprocity at the core of everything that we did. So we set up El Puente, which is our non-profit foundation that makes investments and grants to indigenous-led projects. And we've set up a council of elders that basically have veto rights, and they can decide where those funds go. And we've given 10% of our equity to El Puente. We've given grants of $110,000 to 4 different projects. We're supporting a permaculture, sacred medicine and plant permaculture farm in Peru, where we're basically growing sustainable ayahuasca to solve this terrible overharvesting of ayahuasca that's happening at the moment. We're supporting indigenous Shipibo Kanibo art projects, where they are using their Kene designs and creating wonderful projects, which we're selling through The Alchemist's Kitchen, which is our online physical plant medicine store here in New York. You might know it. And we already have 2 portfolio companies who have committed equity to El Puente. And it's our dream that El Puente could become one of those vehicles that allow people in the industry to give back. We've also just launched our reciprocity policy paper. It was a multi-stakeholder initiative where we spoke to as many people as we could within the industry, whether it was indigenous leaders, shamans, elders, but also people within the psychedelic community to understand what does it actually mean to build reciprocity into this industry. And the paper was published, I think, maybe a month ago, and we identified 4 key areas that we wanted to focus on, which is biocultural preservation. You know, these indigenous communities are the greatest stewards of our natural world. And they may just be 3% of the population, but they steward 80% of the biodiversity. Appellations of origin, which is all about giving ayahuasca the same kind of legal rights as champagne from Champagne. And then how do we create regulatory sandboxes, like opportunity zones for indigenous businesses within America? And then how do we also support indigenous-led projects with funding? And I'm going to go back, because that is a QR code that, if you just take a photo of it, we'd love you guys to all come and participate. We have our second community call on the 7th of December. Really would appreciate all of you to contribute, read the paper, and be part of this whole process. And so, you know, so many people here today have talked about the need for us to come together, to create a unified, standardized set of ESG KPIs. So I'm just here to reiterate that, to echo that we are committed as a company to working with all of you wonderful people, businesses, to do that so that we can truly make sure that this industry evolves in an ethical way that we're all deeply proud of. So let's form a coalition of the willing, and as we say at Woven, stronger together. Thank you so much.
Okay, so our next speaker is someone who is very special today, as they are both the title sponsor for the Horizons 2021 conference, which is greatly helpful for us, and in particular in riding the wave of such an unpredictable year. That kind of support is very, very meaningful to us. I also want it understood in this room what sponsorship means at Horizons, in that we do not sell stage time as part of sponsor offerings. The curation of our programs are fully editorial, and we only welcome and include people on the stage that we genuinely believe have a contribution to make and want to platform. And this stands in pretty stark contrast to the normal trade show and sort of industry conference model, which is usually driven by the desires of essentially advertisers and suffers from somewhat of an intellectual paucity as a result. And we try really hard here at Horizons to give people things that are really worth thinking about. So, we're greatly appreciative for the sponsors that we do have, because they are the ones who, even though we did not offer them a transaction, you give us money and we put you on our stage, still chose to support us independently of that, because they want there to be an independent forum for this community, and also know wisely that they will benefit from that in a way that they won't from having a health and wellness expo or an industry trade show. Because we have very, very important problems to solve in this community, and we have to have deep, long-term thinking, critical discourse, and real voices on stage. This is also a very exciting moment, because there's about to be an announcement that is very, very interesting and ties together many of the things we've been hearing about today at a scale that is truly noteworthy and will be very meaningful in achieving some of the goals that I believe everyone in this room shares. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Ryan Zurrer of Vine Ventures.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you for all the work that you do. You and other leaders who have been walking this path for a long time allow us to all be here. I'm very grateful. So, I want to get to an announcement that's very, very important to me, and I'm very, very excited about. But first, I'll just walk through a little bit of the journey of how we came to be with Vine Ventures. I've been a psychonaut for a long time and was very, very fortunate to meet my wife at her ayahuasca center in Peru a number of years ago. And I've been able to accompany enough of her ceremonies over the years to sort of conduct my own empirical study that very clearly something special is happening when people bring intention and a therapeutic process combined with the catalytic moment that psychedelics can offer. And so around 2018, I started to look at this space from the lens of a venture capitalist, which is my profession. And I genuinely believe that when venture capital is applied correctly, it seeks to create great value from solving the world's biggest problems. I can think of no greater problem that we face today than the mental health pandemic we have unleashed onto our society. So as I was going around to conferences and meeting people, I made two observations that have stuck with me ever since. The first was that a lot of the work that had been done to bring the sector to this point had been led by nonprofits. And again, we're so grateful for that stoic path that groups like MAPS, led by Rick and Amy, have walked all these years to allow us to be here. And the second was that because of this culture and ingrained mission alignment around people who are so passionate about therapies, both for curing the sick and betterment of the well, that they were very standoffish to any form of for-profit capital. And so when I would be at a conference like this and I would mention that I'm a venture capitalist, immediately a shield would go up and someone would be from behind it, right? So, and that was for good reason, right? A lot of the capitalists that have, found themselves in the TSX ventures and so on and so forth, don't really feel like they are one of us. Don't really feel like they're mission aligned. There's a lot of models that are being described about the future of psychedelic therapies that just represent what appears to be a dystopian future that I don't want to live in. So Vine became a vehicle of necessity rather than of desire. I felt like we had to do Vine in order to fund radically different approaches. And at Vine, we spent a lot of time thinking about alternative funding approaches, alternative business models, and so on and so forth. And so over the last couple of years, I've been lucky enough to enjoy a lot of lunches and coffees with Fede and Liana at MAPS, where we've been talking about how we could create an alternative funding mechanism. And I am very excited to announce today that after that has come to a precipice over the last number of months, we have created what we're calling the Regenerative Financing Vine. The Regenerative Financing Vine is a $70 million vehicle that will fund MAPS and will most importantly allow MAPS to stay nonprofit and control their IP over the long term. By putting MAPS out in front of this industry, we're going to be able to set a commercial and cultural bar for access that I think will fundamentally change the arc of the history of this space. So just to describe the design of the vehicle, for those of you who are interested, we wanted to really make a simple vehicle. We didn't want an overly complex mechanism, and so it is an SPV that shares in 6.1% of the revenue that MAPS PBC will realize for MDMA-related therapies in continental North America over the course of 8 years after the start of commercialization. And then there is a sunset to it. And so that sunset creates a couple of important mechanisms. From an investor's perspective, this looks much more like venture debt than venture equity. And we've also designed in a reciprocity mechanism. So at 1x, the vehicle starts to return 15% of contribution back to MAPS org. At 3x, it starts to return 50% of contribution back to MAPS org. What that does is that allows us to participate in the upside that MAPS may realize by opening up new geographies and new indications. But while we're doing that, we share more of the benefit back with MAPS. Again, what that does is that makes the return profile for investors look somewhat logarithmic rather than purely exponential, venture equity return profile. So I wanted the vehicle to stand up on its own 2 feet as an investment opportunity, so that even if we couldn't convince enough mission-aligned folks, enough MAPS people who have been supporting MAPS for a number of years to get this significant amount of capital together, we could sell this as essentially venture debt, or as my friend Steve Jurvetson highlighted this afternoon, almost like project finance around MDMA rollout in continental North America. But for those of us who are mission aligned and believe in the important mission that MAPS is on, and respect the deep work that has gone into it, not only from Rick over the 35 years, but Amy and so many others who are committed to this, it represents an opportunity to contribute to something, have a return, but feel really good about what you're doing. If you're a psychedelics investor, you can also think about the fact that by putting MAPS out in front of the industry, we'll create more balance in the value accrual across the entire value chain over the decades to come. So instead of all of the value accruing to the long arm of a patent held by a drug development company, you have more value share that can be shared down the chain with, clinics and clinicians and therapists and manufacturers and other people who will support the growth of this industry moving forward. And it allows us, most importantly, to set that cultural and commercial bar for access. It's impossible for a pharmaceutical company to come along in a few years and charge some order of magnitude higher than MAPS is setting today. And I'm really excited for that social experiment. With that, for those of you who are capital deployers of any kind, whether that's impact investing, whether that's a psychedelic investor, whether that's a philanthropist, or whether that's a venture debt investor, please reach out. My entire team is here this week at your disposal. We can walk you through the particulars, but we will have to walk you through this very, very quickly. We've been absolutely overwhelmed by the interest around the regenerative financing vine. But the thing that means the most to me on planet Earth right now is just getting MAPS this funding and getting these checks through the door so that we can continue to allow MAPS to enjoy the lead that it has set and what that means culturally for everybody here. So this will close very quickly. We do find ourselves in a moment of soft circle oversubscribed, and we're very excited about that. But we want to include as many value-aligned investors and community participants in this vehicle as possible. We want this to be inclusive the way that MAPS community has been inclusive for so many years. And I would just like to end by thanking Rick and the entire MAPS team for all that you do. We are so committed to help take you guys forward, and we're so grateful for everything that you've done for all of us.
And of course, we have one final exemplar today to talk about the work they're doing before we go into our little bit of a panel. And it is my pleasure to welcome back to Horizons after what I believe has been, what do we think? Almost 10 years since her last appearance, Amy Emerson, the CEO of the MAPS Public Benefit Corporation.
There's a really amazing thing about getting to go last. I don't need to say anything. It's kind of beautiful because have realized through sitting here and listening today that the MAP's vision, values, and mission has just spread and evolved and been innovated in ways that are just unbelievable for me. But I am still going to talk. I'm going to talk about how this business model can leverage purpose-driven corporate structures, and this alternative funding method can really create pathways for psychedelic drug development and innovation in mental health treatments. And if you, let's see, which clicker worked, Leah? Okay. If you can believe it, somebody's going to do it for me. Excellent. If you can believe it, I was having a slide up here to tell you who MAPS is. I don't think I'm going to tell you that now, but just in case you don't know a little bit about the public. So MAPS was formed in 1986 after MDMA was scheduled by the Controlled Substances Act. And then the MAPS Public Benefit Corp was formed as the research arm of MAPS, and it was founded by a very small group of us, including Rick and myself, in 2014, and it's now 110 people and growing, and we're a wholly owned subsidiary of MAPS. The last time I was up here, like Kevin said, was 2012, and it was my first time ever giving a psychedelic talk, too. I was so nervous. Now I'm just a bundle of emotions. But at that point, we were still in the middle of our phase 2 studies. Like, I couldn't have even imagined where we're at right now. And so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about how we got here. And so in order to understand like this model and why we came up with it, I want you to understand some of our motives of how this started, and how, I don't think I probably need to tell you, but purpose-driven organizations are driven by the ethos of those who founded and grow them. So when I first met Rick, it was 2002, and I was immediately drawn to his vision to revitalize psychedelic research and bring it out of what was primarily at that time research on harms and back into the medical system, and really bring it into research for treatment using psychedelics. And to do all of this as a nonprofit pharma. That's what got me. I worked in for-profit pharma at the time doing vaccine research. And also, he didn't just want to stop there. It was also about the broader public policy and laws related to scheduled drugs. So this combination of goals really meant that we had to do some things in a really traditional way through this drug development program, but also we had to be really innovative and take risks to accomplish this big picture. We really had no idea how fast this was going to grow. It was really just a field of, it was a niche field, a few really passionate people really dedicated to making the dream of accessibility to psychedelics a reality. But it has grown incredibly. And as it's grown, our vision has expanded, because we've seen firsthand how our results and the results of other people that are here have changed things, and how this work has become accepted. And we believe that developing access to psychedelic therapies in this safe, affordable, thoughtful manner will improve society in a meaningful way and lead to a radical reimagination of mental health care. It's already happening. We also share a real concern that I'm less concerned about today, that once a pathway for regulatory approval of psychedelic treatments is clear, that the space could become dominated by companies whose primary obligation is to shareholders and their benefit. Let's not do that. I don't think we are. That's why we're all here. We want to be different. We want to create a different future, and I see that there's ways to do that. I see that there's other people also looking for these alternative modes, and they're leading the way in this developing field. We know that in order to do something different, you have to be different. You must be willing to face uncertainty of walking a different path and to architect a new future. And not everybody has the luxury of doing it for 30 years like we did before you get here. So there's a quote that I really like from Bucky Fuller: "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So MAPS recently published a revised set of values that really embody our ethos. This is something so important for everybody to do, and I hear people doing that. throughout all of these talks. So integrity, perseverance, curiosity, and equity. These are our North Stars. It's so important that you set your values and you stick to them. These guide you through a lot of tough decisions, and they help us to make the decisions that stay aligned so that we have the potential to change mental health care for the better. You can go to the next one. MAPS is responsible for an enormous amount of the public education and advocacy that has got us here today, and I see that being taken up by so many more people. But I want to acknowledge our teams who have worked so hard with so much dedication with our original vision to champion not only medical research, but drug policy reform, centering harm reduction, creating psychedelic peer support systems, and supporting other companies, both for-profit and nonprofit, that are entering psychedelic space. Our teams have also raised the capital funding that has brought us to this point solely through philanthropy, and it's been an incredible amount of hard work. So my group is the Public Benefit Corp, and as that research arm of MAPS, we have put that funding to use to advance MDMA-assisted therapy, and my group is responsible for leading research and development, running clinical trials, training therapists, manufacturing MDMA, and working with the FDA as well as EMA and really all international regulatory bodies to move MDMA-assisted therapy through the regulatory process globally. And we're defining the commercial strategy to bring these new treatments to the market as affordably and equitably as possible. This unique ownership model that we have of a nonprofit over a for-profit takes a holistic approach and has allowed us to be really innovative and to take the risks necessary to get here. And based on what we feel, and make our choices based on what we feel is of the greatest benefit. It's allowed us to focus our attention on the outcomes that are patient-centered. We want to maximize therapeutic value, build a robust pipeline, and build a regulatory commercial strategy that allows delivery of treatments to those who need them most, and to really have a creative and innovative industry that doesn't put limits and doesn't block the development of new treatments. MAPS has been really successful, as I've said, at philanthropy. It's been $120 million that we've raised through philanthropy to get us to where we're at. And the PBC is set up to ultimately start to return this to MAPS as revenue grows. And we view this sustainability as a key aspect of our business model. And the Vine deal is really going to be a huge part of that. It's built right into this new way that we're looking at financing. So the profits that are returned to MAPS will help MAPS continue to do work in advancing psychedelic research, providing honest public education, developing generative business practices, and making access to these treatments equitable through assistance programs. In the years coming up to the commercial and medical access, we're planning on investing about $130 million more into commercialization, $30 million into the EU approval process, and the rest into other research and development activities. This would be looking at new molecules, looking at new indication, looking at pragmatic studies to expand the paradigm. Our fundamental business model has been driven by the knowledge that while we may be the first company to get through psychedelic-assisted therapy into the FDA approval, we can't do it alone, and we really believe in supporting the work of all the others in the field because the need for novel mental health treatments is just too great. And though it can be said that these treatments are not really novel, as we've brought up by many people, they've existed throughout history for hundreds of years. They are novel in our current medical system, and we need to get them back there. So at this moment, as you've already heard from Ryan, we're kind of going into an area of a time of more rapid growth, as if it hasn't already been what feels like rapid growth to me right now. But this is going to be even more rapid to make this happen and to really create the access that's needed. And we're so appreciative of the support from the donors that we have had, and we're really excited to explore this new revenue financing model with really mission-aligned partners like Vine and all those who are joining on this special purpose vehicle. This will really bridge the funding gap to sustainable commercial operations. And it still is allowing us to maintain the independence of our organization, not give up equity or control, And that's such an important part. That's what's allowing us to be who we are and to continue this vision. So I think I'm going to end there because I'm out of time. But
we definitely have some questions. So at this time, I'd like to bring everyone who just spoke in this Putting Principles into Action section back on stage. 6 of you can help yourself to a nice red leather chair with pretty decent upholstery. At least a couple of you are probably going to be like in the summer camp photo, maybe just sitting on the edge of the stage looking casual. I'm going to nominate Tom to sit on the stage because he's from the Pacific Northwest and they don't like pretenses there. Giles, you're kind of tall, so I'm going to nominate you to sit on the edge of the stage too, maybe hang out with Tom. So thank you guys for sharing this. It's been a dream to put one of these together now for the last conference we had in 2019. A couple of you are already at work, and you were all working in some way, but what has happened over the last 24 months is just truly extraordinary, and it really is an honor to see so many people who in this field do not want to settle for business as usual, who want to do something different, who want to do something better, and who hopefully are going to pioneer models that others will be able to use and replicate to build an economy and an ecosystem where growth, profit, sustainability can go hand in hand with things that really and truly do benefit the public and society as a whole. I'm going to use executive privilege here to ask a couple questions I want to hear about, and then we're going to open it to what I hope will be a few brief and specific and pointed questions from the gallery. We're going to hand out some toys. One can go to these. Maybe we'll get this over to Tom. Yeah, and maybe you'll hold one over here. You know, hope all those microphones are on. And my first question is for Tom. And I want to know if you can comment to this room on some of the specific provisions in the 109 bill in terms of who can own a facility in the older years and who can become a practitioner, who has the controlling interest in a company that delivers a psilocybin service, and maybe some of the reasons that those were designed into the bill.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll stand, I suppose. So yeah, in terms of service centers and manufacturers or product developers, cultivators of mushrooms, well, let me just start with the producers. By the way, it's not just synthetics in our model. In fact, we are incorporating organic materials, extracts to create products, and these are all independently licensed organizations, whether it's a product producer or a service center. We call service center where the services happen to a licensed center. And so there is a residency requirement in a way. There's a 50% residency requirement. So 50% of the ownership has to be an Oregonian. And we did that to kind of ground the program in Oregon, of course. And it's so important to us to have kind of a community sense throughout the state of Oregon to as I said when I was talking, to move this forward in a way that really feels like one community. So we certainly invite people to come into Oregon and look at this program, and we hope that it's a relationship building kind of sense, that we develop community in Oregon to develop this program. Now that sunsets in 2025. We want to get off on the right foot with kind of building up the existing underground, bringing them above ground, and that's why we did that. Was there another piece to that question? Or?
You're pretty good.
Cool.
And Amy, I want to ask of you, there's going to be an interesting or complementary opportunities or maybe a showdown, perhaps as soon as 2023 in the state of Oregon, where there may be concurrently available both MDMA-assisted therapy delivered in a medical environment via, for instance, MAPS, while simultaneously there is a legal and regulated statewide market for psilocybin experiences offered under 109. And if you could talk about some of the discussions you might have at MAPS about how do you relate to some of these initiatives that offer access outside of the FDA framework, and what kind of questions people should be asking if they're given the opportunities between these two systems, and what this kind of choice looks like from the perspective of MAPS PBC, which doesn't necessarily financially benefit from the 109 system and may in fact potentially have some access on sales, but is also deeply value aligned with the kind of work and advocacy that MAPS has been doing for years.
That's the beautiful...
Hope you didn't expect any softballs from me. Hope you didn't expect any softballs from me.
That's the beautiful thing about a benefit corp that puts benefit above profit, is that we can be very supportive of this type of work. I think, MAPS and MAPS PBC do so much more than medical research, and I think there's room for both. We've always had a goal of public policy, changes in legal status, and really looking at making these things these substances, widely available. I think there's going to be a difference still in Oregon of the availability of psilocybin versus MDMA, and really what we'll have approval for is specifically for PTSD. And so I think people will have a choice, and that's a beautiful thing.
Okay. And Leah, maybe you could speak to this question of access, and even under a model such as Measure 109, where it's presumed that the cost of delivery of care may be lower than under the FDA model. What is the piece that the insurance and payer infrastructure and access to care will play in terms of having a nationwide system set up for insurance that may have overlapping jurisdictions with statewide initiatives?
Great. So the distinction between services that are being rendered in an Oregon model, which are not technically medical treatment and therefore will be unlikely to be covered by health insurance directly. However, that does not mean that as these initiatives become more popular and hopefully gain rescheduling at the federal level, that you couldn't offer wellness products, meaning employers could cover these services as wellness benefits because they have, health benefits to their employees. And so we would look at an Oregon-type model in the future. Depends on how quickly things are rescheduled, going the wellness route, where with MDMA and things that are going through the FDA, that's going to be a medical treatment that will be covered by traditional health insurance eventually. It will require a diagnosis and different types of licensure and so forth. Is that helpful?
Yeah. And Ryan, one for you. When you were talking to partners and LPs and explaining this revenue-based financing system to them, was anyone puzzled or give you pushback or ask for a level of return in terms of multiples? What were the conversations you had, on the street with real investors trying to explain this unconventional thing to people?
We were very fortunate that enough of our investors see the wider benefit that this creates, that there was buy-in very quickly. The questions that often come up are, can a nonprofit drug development organization turn into a high-octane drug deployment company? And I've been very encouraged by the evolution of the organization, a lot of the talent that they've brought in under Amy's leadership, like Chris Lotlicker and many others, where you see that they are taking a very pragmatic approach at this point, that they're is partnering for what they can't build, and they're executing on what they can build. And that's really why they need this capital at this point, because we have to effectively build the rails to then deliver the raw material on. We're building the infrastructure here. And so that's part of the questions that come up, is why so much money right now? And it's because we actually have to build out the baseline infrastructure to deploy these medicines to people. And I'm very encouraged by the evolution of the organization in this regard. And I think investors also resonated deeply with meeting the team and seeing how it's evolved and how it's going to continue to evolve.
Okay, so I don't want to, as much as I'd like to continue questioning this group while I have them sequestered here. If there are a couple of things from the audience, people who want to know things from those assembled on stage that are in fact short questions where they desire information from the assembled speakers, we probably have time for 3 or 4 before I ask that we hold the room for another few minutes. We're going to do concluding remarks. We're going to bring things back down. And then drinks. So we have a question out there.
Yeah, for the short one. Sheva. I was deeply involved in decriminalized Denver in Colorado and continue to work with all of those. My husband Kevin and I have been really involved in. So my question for you is, as a cannabis and psychedelic business consultant, my commitment is to entrepreneurs. And I've been hearing a ton all day about therapeutics and therapy-based models and the psychotherapists who offer. And my question is, what about the rest of us? What about the healers who are not therapists, who can be qualified, or at least can be, we can find qualified providers who are not therapists, the shamans of the world, spiritual folks who know how to hold space. And so that's my question, is essentially is there room in the regulations, or are you seeing a future of regulations that include non-therapeutic service providers?
So you touched on a really interesting point here. I don't know if my mic's on. So you touched on a really interesting point here, where I think we're one of the only groups who very unabashedly supports psychedelics, both for curing the sick and betterment of the well, and make no apologies in that regard. And we are seeing an evolution towards liberalization that will take many different looks in many different areas. Internally, we have this concept that we loosely call the cacao markets: Canada, California, Colorado, and Oregon. These are the markets that will sort of emerge and lead. And because we've seen the allegory of cannabis be very successful in these markets, we do think that they will migrate towards more broad-based liberalization very quickly. I'm not saying legalization intentionally, but some form of liberalization. And so that could be in the form of some of the 4,000 underground therapists who do such amazing work all across continental North America, being able to emerge and be able to do their work legally and proudly. And it could eventually evolve, and I think will eventually evolve, into some forms of recreational use for those use cases around betterment of the well. And so, for example, a portfolio project of ours, Othership, explores how this may evolve in really interesting settings.
And Rachel, maybe you can talk a little bit about its synthesis, because I think this is something in particular that you've been doing for years now.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking that. Thank you for the question. So we really, I had said before, we believe in medicine and science being honored, as well as wisdom and lineage and tradition. And our team reflects that, and we have therapists. In our training program, to answer your question, we really look for people outside of the clinically trained, any of that space whatsoever. In our training program that we offer to the public, we use internally. So we have some controls in place of looking at, what are we training and how are we delivering these retreats together, taking care of clients together, but really letting people be, that so-called underground. I don't like the word, but we have a Shipibo sitting with a psychiatrist, and clients, participants, they need both. It's an and both. We need all of these. I think the clinical alone is dangerous, and so is the other, right? So there are ways like companies might use their training internally to bring in people that aren't so-called licensed, right? So that access needs to be there.
Yeah, and Giles is woven looking at opportunities outside the medical and therapeutic space, just among people who simply might like or enjoy psychedelics?
Look, it's a great question. One that we talk about internally the whole time. Like we're already seeing it, right? Lots of different regulatory outcomes happening, and we really believe that all of these different regulatory landscapes can play beautifully together. In fact, we think they have to. So for us, yeah, we absolutely will support all of the different, whether it's decrim, we're kind of set up to do it, right? So we have our wellness platform where we can produce all of the kind of picks and shovels, the education tools that you need to go on your own personal journey. And then we have the ability to kind of support legalization. And then we do believe also in the medicalization, and all these things can work and should work together.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Willa and Casey, when you start hearing questions like this as people who are clinicians who primarily work with people who have diagnosable disorders and are seeking healing, when you start hearing about this broadening of access in terms of both practitioners or people seeking experiences, do you have concerns or caution or a different kind of viewpoint about, are there alarm bells ringing, or do you have somewhat of a practitioner's, a psychiatrist or therapist viewpoint on this question?
I do. I don't know if I have alarm bells ringing. I do think that there are sometimes dangers associated with the use, but that can happen in a clinical setting as well. So I just think educating people about sort of how to have these experiences as safely as possible, and the physical, the medical, the aspects of it need to be sort of understood and addressed. So I think this is really kind of a question of working with the community and educating them about how to have these kinds of experiences safely. And
yeah, I don't know if this is on, but I do, just echoing something that Ryan mentioned, and also about the betterment of well people, and to echo what Rachel said about this being a both and. I mean, personally, I feel these substances, yes, they're here to usher in a really profound paradigm shift in mental health, for sure. But I see them, the true value, which is, I think of probably incalculable value, but I also see them as a means toward addressing what I think of as a real societal illness, which is the sort of meaningfulness famine that we're all sort of living through right now. We live in an age where organized religion has failed most of us in pretty drastic ways, and we have materialist reductionism on the other side that says the universe is just a meaningless concatenation of random events, that all of this is accidental, and I'm looking forward to the heat death of the universe and all of this being for nothing. So I mean, that's sort of the two poles that create a real problem for us as a society, as a culture, because we've lost our connection to something truly transcendent. And I see psychedelics as really being able to foster sort of a rekindling of a true Gnostic tradition, where in a non-dogmatic way we can sort of connect to, language is really kind of a minefield here, but I would call this like an inner divinity. I mean, the entheogen term is appropriate. It comes with baggage because people, don't like the idea of God or whatnot, but I mean, it's true that we live in a very profoundly mysterious universe, and there's something there, that doesn't need to be anything at all, let alone something that's comprehensible and beautiful and, can provide meaningful, amazing life experiences for us. It's just, we've lost touch with that, I think, in some really troubling ways, and I think the real driving force of all the problems that we're facing as a planet, as a civilization, derive from the fact that we've lost touch with things that connect us to something truly greater than just material success. So I see psychedelics as playing a crucial role there, and I don't think you need to necessarily be a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist to hold space for that. Although I do think that, getting back to Rachel's point about this being both and, there needs to be some safety in place, and psychedelics are not going to be safe for every single person, and I think there needs to be some, science behind or some medical component to assessing that. Honestly, not as a way of being gatekeepers, but as a way of keeping people safe.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We want one more? Okay. Of course.
I don't know if that's, yeah. So I'm just going to take that in another direction really quickly, because I heard you say, like, what about the rest of us? So people who maybe have been working with medicines, maybe carrying medicines. I'm just going to speak about this at a theoretical level really quickly. I'm going to be talking about it a little bit more tomorrow. There is precedent in the medical system whereby non-licensed but trained technicians are able to render different forms of care. So this means that, in theory, it is possible that people, perhaps who have years of experience, would be able to find a pathway to working in medical settings if they wanted to do so. It requires the field to become organized around that and to make some definitions, the field itself to start defining who can work safely and legally with these medicines, but it is a possibility.
All right. Well, in the interest of honoring my covenant with all of you, of trying to end this on time and getting to drinks, I am now going to welcome to the stage North Star board member Nicole Howell, who is going to share some closing remarks. And following that, Hanifa is going to once again ground us and conclude our program for the day. And we ask that if you're in the room, you just hold on for another minute. We'll bring you down gently, and we'll get to have a little bit of fun together this evening. Welcome, Nicole.
All right. Liana has been called away, and so I have been asked to channel my inner Liana. So I just want to say, which is a tall order. It is a tall order. So I wanted to say thank you on behalf of North Star. This has really been a beautiful day. We have gotten to know each other. We have learned from each other about how each of us is navigating the tension between being enterprising and being awake, how to stay centered and on our game, and to grapple with the internal struggle that my favorite science fiction author, the great Octavia Butler, calls the human contradiction, which is that the strength of our intelligence is matched by our tendency for hierarchy. And today, for me, my experience is that this has been an exercise in recognizing that contradiction, looking at it straight in the face, and helping each other as peers and as a community to figure out how we might help to heal ourselves and business from that contradiction. This is an inside job, Leah Mix, but we need one another. We are, as North Star, just a tiny harmonica, and we need a Dylan and a Big Mama Thornton, and we need a guitar and a band and all of you to make this a reality. This is really just the beginning. North Star is in a 2.0 phase. The pledge, initially, it was a flare, a beacon, a smoke signal to gather this heart tribe together. It had initially started working with groups of investors and groups of entrepreneurs to provide an opportunity to connect with one another and figure out ways to connect across those spheres, and had started to create toolkits and tools for how to actually operationalize this. And so we will be starting up those offerings again. And so I want to extend an invitation here, please, to all of you. Please, if you haven't, please find us, northstar.guide. And please join the conversation. We will be reaching out to start creating these guilds once again, and to be giving both the investor community and the entrepreneur community tools so that we can make this happen. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking responsibility for what's possible. Thank you.